You know, it's the smell of honeysuckle that does it sometimes. Hits me like a warm breeze on the back porch, and just like that, I'm 16 again. Happens out of nowhere. The other day, my granddaughter was baking, bless her heart, she burns water, and I stepped outside for some air. And there it was, honeysuckle. Lord have mercy, I hadn't thought of her in years. And yet, there she was, clear as day. Her hair pulled back in a red ribbon, lips pink as watermelon gum, and eyes that always looked like they were holding a secret. It was a summer evening, 1944. Back then, we lived in Covington, Kentucky, right above my Uncle Roy's general store. You could hear the trains pass in the distance and smell tobacco from the old man down the road who chewed all day and never said a word. We didn't have a pot to pee in, but Mama made cornbread like you wouldn't believe, and we had a Bible in every room, even the pantry. Daddy worked long hours down by the freight yard. Mama, well, she prayed like the world was on fire. Twice a day on her knees, talking to the Lord like he was sitting at the kitchen table with her. That's just the way things were back then. I don't know why I'm thinking about this now. Maybe it's 'cause I'm getting older, or maybe 'cause the world's changing faster than I can keep up. My grandson tells me girls can marry girls now. He says it like it's nothing. Just casual, like a skin if I want cream in my coffee. And I nod, I smile, but inside, it stirs something real old. Something I tucked away a long, long time ago. You young folks wouldn't understand back in my day, we didn't even have a name for it. And if we did, well, we wouldn't dare speak it out loud. It was dangerous. Shameful. At least that's what they told us. I've never told this story before. Not to my husband, not to my children, not even to the girls at Sunday Circle. But lately, I've been feeling like maybe it's time. Maybe before I go, I ought to say it out loud, even just once. 'Cause it's been sitting in my chest for over 70 years like a secret too heavy to carry and too tender to let go. And I'll tell you what, it started with a girl named Marion. She came from Cincinnati, smelled like peppermint, and played piano like she was talking straight to God. We were just girls. 16, full of music and secrets and summer heat. And that night behind the choir barn, well, that night changed everything. But I'm getting ahead of myself. This story, it's not just about a kiss. It's about a silence. A hush that wrapped itself around my whole life. And why sometimes, when the honeysuckles bloom in, I still remember the taste of that moment like it just happened yesterday. So, if you've got a minute and a quiet place to sit, I'd like to tell you something. Something I've never said out loud before. My name was Iris June, and my very first kiss wasn't with a boy. Back then, I was just a skinny little thing with knees like broom handles and a drawer full of ribbon scraps Mama said I'd grow into someday. I was 16, but folks said I had an old soul, always dreamin', always hummin' some hymn or another. I wasn't the kind to stir up trouble. Didn't sass, didn't stray. I helped Mama hang the laundry out back, stirred the beans when she got tired, and said, "Yes, ma'am," so often it just rolled off my tongue without thinking. We weren't poor, but we weren't much better. We made do with what we had. Daddy worked sunup to sundown, and Mama, well, she kept us fed with beans, biscuits, and faith. I believed back then that the world was mostly good, that if you were kind and quiet and prayed before bed, life would give you something sweet in return. I thought love was what I saw in the movies, a man with polished shoes talking your hand, maybe dipping you back under a porch light. I didn't know there was another kind of love too. Not until Marion. She showed up one morning at school, like a soft breeze through a cracked window. New girl, all in navy blue. Her dress had a little white collar, and her hair was dark and smooth like spilled molasses. She smelled like peppermint and lilacs, which was strange, 'cause lilacs weren't even in season. And her voice, land sakes alive, it was soft but sure, like she knew things I didn't. She came from Cincinnati. Her daddy was some kind of office man, always moving them around for this job or that. I remember thinking she looked like she belonged in a picture book. One of those fancy city girls you'd never imagine talking to you, but she did. First day, she sat next to me in geometry, said, "You've got nice handwriting," and smiled like it was the easiest thing in the world. I didn't say much, but my heart near about jumped out of my chest. We got close fast, faster than most girls do, I suppose. Folks started calling us two peas in a pod. We'd walk home together, take turns reading poetry under the big oak tree out behind the church. She played piano like an angel. I'd sit beside her on that bench in the dusty music room after school and just listen. Her fingers moved like they were telling a story only I could hear. And I'd look at her hands and wonder what it would feel like if she ever reached for mine. I didn't have the words for it then. I didn't even think of it as anything wrong, not yet anyway. It just felt good, safe, like sitting under a quilt in winter while the wind howled outside. I think I loved her from the moment she handed me that piece of peppermint gum on the second day of school. But I didn't know that's what it was. I just knew that when she laughed, my chest got warm. And when she didn't come to school one day, I missed her like I'd lost something I hadn't even realized I had. Looking back, I was still just a girl, dreaming small dreams, getting out of town maybe, finnin' a gentleman, raising a family, cooking Sunday supper. I believed that goodness was the most important thing, that if you did right, the Lord would protect you. I didn't understand yet that sometimes, the very things that feel like love can scare the world half to death. I didn't know that some kinds of love came with silence, with risk, with secrets tucked between piano keys and sideways glances. But I felt something, and even now, after all these years, I remember the way her fingers brushed mine one afternoon when we both reached for the same book. It wasn't much, but it stayed with me, just like she did. Her name was Marian. You know, some nights just settle into your memory like a soft melody you can't shake. That summer evening back in 44 was one of those nights. The kind of night when the air smells like cut grass and something sweet you can't quite name. We'd just finished choir rehearsal at the little church on Main Street, the kind where the wooden pews creak and the stained glass windows throw colors all over the floor. Marian and we usually walked home together, but that night felt different. It was quiet, like the world was holding its breath. We slipped behind the old barn at the edge of the schoolyard, the one where the paint was peeling and the roof sagged like it was tired from years of storms. I remember she looked at me then, eyes gleaming with something I'd never seen before. "I've been thinking," she said soft as a whisper, "I wonder what it would be like to love someone for real. To not have to hide it. Land sakes alive," I didn't know what to say. My heart felt like it was gonna jump clean out of my chest. You young folks wouldn't understand, but back then, things like that were dangerous to even say. Love was a thing between a boy and a girl. That was just the way it was. But Marian, she didn't care what was just the way. She reached for my hand, and I didn't pull away. I just closed my eyes. That first kiss, it wasn't like anything I'd read about in books or seen in the movies. It was quiet, tender, and filled with the kind of hope I didn't know I was holding onto. When our lips met, it was like a spark, a secret promise tucked away in the dark. That night, the world felt small and big all at once. The barn around us smelled of old hay and moonlight. I remember my breath catching, my knees shaking, but also feeling safe, like maybe I'd found a place where I could be myself, even if only for a moment. We didn't say much after, just held hands and listened to the crickets sing their summer song. When I got home, the porch light was still on, and Mama was sitting with her Bible, praying the night away. I tiptoed past, my heart heavy with a secret I didn't yet have words for. I lay awake for hours, thinking about Marian, about that kiss. I didn't know what the morning would bring, or if it would bring anything at all. But I knew one thing. Something inside me had changed forever. You see, that moment wasn't just about a kiss. It was a door opening to a part of myself I'd kept locked away. A part that was scared, but also brave. A part that whispered, "This is who you are." And in a world where such things were shushed and hidden, That whisper was both a blessing and a burden. That night set off a chain of days I wouldn't forget, days filled with stolen glances, secret smiles, and the kind of longing that burns quietly beneath your skin. Marian didn't know it yet, but she changed my life. And Lord have mercy, I'd carry that with me for the rest of my days. After that night, everything started changing, though at first, it was so quiet you might not have noticed. Marian didn't come to school the next day. And then the day after that. The teachers whispered, the other kids stared, and rumors started flying like autumn leaves in a storm. I tried to tell myself she was just sick, or maybe her family had to move for her daddy's work. That's what folks said, anyway. But I knew better. I felt it in my bones. Something had gone wrong, something that scared her. And maybe scared me too, though I wouldn't admit it back then. Mama noticed my mood shift, but she never asked. You know how it is with some folks. You carry your worries in silence, like a stone in your shoe. I didn't have the words, and even if I did, I sure as shootin' wouldn't have spoken 'em out loud. Not in Covington, Kentucky in 1944. That place was tight-knit and small-minded all at once. A place where people watched your every move and whispered behind your back. You didn't want to give them any reason to talk. I was scared. I was ashamed. I kept thinking maybe it was just a phase, something I'd grow out of like chickenpox or braces. But deep down, I knew it was more. I didn't understand it all, but I knew it was mine. Something secret, fragile, and too heavy for a 16-year-old girl to carry. The day Marian's family moved away, I stood on the corner near the grocery store, clutching the strap of my school bag so tight my knuckles turned white. I wanted to call out to her to say goodbye, but the words got caught in my throat. Her eyes met mine one last time, and for a moment, it felt like she was trying to tell me everything without saying a single word. Then she was gone just like that, and the silence she left behind was deafening. There was no one to turn to, no one who'd understand. Mama's prayers got louder that summer, but I'm not sure if she prayed for me or just for the world to stay quiet. Daddy worked harder than ever, but the house felt emptier than before. I wandered those dusty streets like a ghost, carrying a secret no one could see but me. I wanted to scream, wanted to tell someone, anyone, but I was afraid of what they'd say, how they'd look at me. You know how small towns can be. Folks don't forgive easy, especially when it comes to things they don't understand. Some nights, I'd sit by the window, looking out at the stars, wondering if there was a place where I could be who I was without fear. Wondering if I'd ever be free to love without looking over my shoulder. But those were quiet dreams, dreams I tucked away deep, alongside the Bible and the Sunday hymns. The world told me to be normal, to marry a good man, raise children, keep the house tidy. That was the path laid out for me, and I was scared to step off it. I remember once, I tried to tell a friend, just a little hint, and she looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "You're just confused, Iris," she said, and laughed it off. I swallowed my pride and my truth right there. That was the day I learned silence was safer. And so, I kept it all locked inside. The love, the fear, the hope, all packed away in a little box I hid deep in my heart. That summer changed me. It made me tougher, but it also made me lonelier than I ever thought possible. Sometimes, I think back on those days and wonder what might have been different if I'd had someone to talk to. Someone who wouldn't have turned away or whispered behind my back. But then I remind myself that was just the way things were back then. I remember it like it was yesterday, though the years try their best to blur the edges. It was a Sunday afternoon, the kind where the sun hangs low and the cicadas hum louder than the preacher's voice. I was sitting on the front porch, my hands trembling as I held a letter I'd never meant to send, but one I had to write anyway. I'd carried that secret in my heart for so long, tucked it away behind prayers and whispered hopes, but that day, the weight of it was too much. The words spilled onto the paper like tears I couldn't hold back. Back then, in our little town in Kentucky, the Bible was more than just a book. It was a law, a shield, and sometimes a prison. Folks believed in right and wrong with the kind of certainty that made no room for questions. let alone love that didn't fit their narrow view. I was no spring chicken, but when it came to this part of my life, I felt younger than ever, like a scared child hiding in the shadows of the very faith I was raised in. I'd been keeping to myself for years, living a life that looked normal on the outside, married to a good man, raising children, going to church every Sunday. But inside, there was a silence so loud it nearly broke me. That letter was my secret rebellion, my way of reaching back to Marion, to that one night behind the barn when everything changed. I wrote, "I still remember you." Just that. No expectations, no demands. Just a longing to be seen, to be acknowledged. But sending that letter would have been like opening a door I wasn't sure I could walk back through. The day I decided not to send it, I felt the clock stop. Time froze on that porch, with the late afternoon sun casting long shadows over my hands. I thought about what could happen if someone found out, the whispers, the judgment, the shame. It was like a cold hand clutching my heart, and I realized then, more clearly than ever, that this secret was both my burden and my sanctuary. I lost something that day, or maybe I gave something up. The chance to reconnect, to heal, to share a truth that had shaped me. But I gained something too. A kind of peace, strange as it sounds. Because sometimes, the kindest thing you can do for yourself is to remember. To hold on to the love that made you who you are, even if it's wrapped in shadows and silence. Living in the Bible Belt meant hiding parts of myself, not just from others, but from the person I saw in the mirror every morning. I told myself it was for the good of the family, for the safety of the ones I loved. But there were nights, many of them, when the loneliness would press down so hard I thought I'd drown. I'd whisper prayers for forgiveness, for strength, for the courage to keep going. And sometimes, I'd cry for the girl I once was, the girl who dared to love in a world that wouldn't let her. That moment, that letter, was a turning point. It broke something open and closed something else shut. I understood then that some stories don't get neat endings. Some loves live in the quiet spaces between words and silences, and that's how it stayed for me, a secret kept safe, a love remembered in the stillness. Lord have mercy, you wouldn't believe the weight a secret like that can carry. But it also gave me a kind of wisdom, a knowing that life isn't always about what you say out loud, but what you hold close to your heart. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is simply to remember and keep on living. After all that storm, the years settled over me like a thick, heavy quilt. I married George when I was 21, just like folks expected me to. He was a good man, worked on the railroad, wore his cap tilted just so, even when we were alone in the kitchen. He had a heart of gold, bless his soul, and I respected him. I did. But love? Well, that was a different story. I loved George like a dear friend, like someone you trust with the small things, the daily chores, the quiet nights. But not like I loved Marianne, not like that summer behind the barn. When I think back, I can see how much I changed after those days. The girl who once dreamed of wildflowers and whispered secrets turned into a woman who kept her heart tucked away. I folded myself into the life I was given, a house filled with laughter, children's footsteps, Sunday dinners, and I did my best to be the wife and mother that everyone wanted me to be. But inside, there was a stillness, a quiet ache I learned to live with. Sometimes, when the house was asleep and the world was still, I'd sit on the back porch and stare at the stars, feeling a loneliness that was hard to shake. The faith I grew up with, the prayers Mama taught me, they became both a comfort and a cage. I prayed for strength to carry on, for forgiveness I wasn't sure I deserved, for peace in a heart that often felt restless. I believed that if I was good, if I followed the rules, maybe that ache would fade. But it didn't. It stayed, like a shadow just out of reach. That part of me, the part that loved Marianne, stayed quiet, safe, hidden. People around me, they didn't know. They never saw the nights I cried quietly into my pillow, or the moments when I longed to tell someone, anyone, the truth that lived inside me. I was the dutiful wife, the loving mother, the good church member. I smiled, I laughed, I played my part well. But there was a part of me that was lost, and I didn't know if I'd ever find it again. Over time, I stopped hoping for things to change. I stopped dreaming of a different life. I learned to be content with what I had, even if it wasn't everything my heart wanted. It's funny how life works like that. You build your walls, brick by brick, and sometimes those walls keep you safe, and sometimes they keep you trapped. Looking back, I realized that what I lost wasn't just a girl or a kiss. It was a part of myself, wild and free and full of possibility. That part got tucked away, buried under years of duty and silence. But even now, I carry it with me, like a secret garden behind a locked gate. Sometimes it blooms in quiet moments, and sometimes it withers in the cold. Life moved on. The children grew up, the seasons changed, and George and I settled into our rhythm. I was no longer the young girl with ribbons in her hair and stars in her eyes. I was a woman shaped by love, loss, and the weight of things unsaid. And though the ache never fully left, I learned to live with it, to find grace in the everyday, to cherish the small joys, to keep moving forward. That's how I survived. Not by forgetting, but by carrying my story with quiet dignity, by loving the life I had, even if it wasn't the one I imagined, and by knowing, deep down, that sometimes the greatest strength is found in simply keeping on. After carrying that secret so long, I thought the weight would crush me. But you learn somehow how to keep still, to breathe in the silence and find a way to live with it. For many years, I did just that. I kept my head down, my heart guarded, and my secrets locked tight where no one could reach them. And it was enough. At least, that's what I told myself. But life has a way of nudging you, gentle, quiet nudges that come when you least expect them. One day, it was a small thing, nothing grand or loud. My granddaughter came to me with a book she was reading for school. It was about kindness, about understanding the world a little better. And as I watched her flip through the pages, her eyes bright with wonder, I felt a spark, a little flame that had been buried under years of dust. I started thinking about all the times I kept still, how I stayed silent not just for myself, but for the people I loved. And I wondered if maybe, just maybe, it was time to be a little less quiet, to let some of that hidden part of me breathe, even if just a little. I began small, helping at church more, volunteering at the community center. It wasn't about being seen or praised. It was about feeling useful again, connected, about remembering that even in a quiet life, there can be purpose. And with every act of kindness, I felt the walls I'd built around my heart soften, just a bit. Sometimes, I'd catch myself looking out the window and smiling at the memory of Marion, not with pain, but with a gentle fondness. I realized that carrying that love quietly didn't mean I was broken. It meant I was brave. Brave enough to live a life that wasn't easy, but was mine. There were days I still felt the old ache, the loneliness, the loss. But now, there was also a glimmer of hope. A sense that maybe, in this late chapter of my life, I could find peace. Maybe I could finally say the words I'd kept locked away, even if only in a whisper. You know, sometimes it's the smallest things that give us new strength. A smile from a stranger, a flower blooming in the garden, a soft breeze on a summer evening. For me, it was the quiet realization that I was still here, still breathing, still capable of love and kindness. And that's enough to keep going. Enough to carry a little light into the dark corners. Enough to remind me that every day is a chance for a new beginning, no matter how old you are. So, I keep still. But now I keep still with a little more hope, a little more courage, and a heart that's learning to open again, slowly, carefully, but surely. You know, it's funny how life circles back on itself. The years catch up, and suddenly, things you thought you'd buried deep come bubbling up like a spring you can't quite shut off. For the longest time, I held that part of me in the shadows, like it was something shameful, something to hide away where no one could see. But now, sitting here with the quiet of my days, I realized that all those years of silence didn't break me. No, sir. They shaped me. They made me who I am. I remember the moment clear as a bell. I was sitting on the porch swing one evening, the sky painted with soft pinks and purples, my hands wrapped around a cup of tea that was long gone cold. My grandson was telling me about his day at the university, something about his classmates, about 2 girls getting married, just like that. And I nodded, smiled, but inside, Lord have mercy, inside something cracked open. That night, I thought about Marian, about the girl I kissed behind the barn all those years ago, about the secrets, the fear, the love I never spoke aloud. And I realized something mighty important, that part of my life, those memories, they don't have to weigh me down anymore. They don't have to be a chain around my heart. So I made a choice. I chose to live, not in hiding, not with regret, not with the shadow of shame hanging over me. I chose to carry my story with me as it is, messy, beautiful, painful, and real. I decided that I'd stop running from the past and start making peace with it. It wasn't easy. You can't just flip a switch on something that's been buried for decades. But step by step, day by day, I found a little more courage to be honest with myself, to forgive myself for the fears I held, the silence I kept, to understand that love, in any form, is something precious, not something to be ashamed of. That decision changed everything. It didn't erase the past, but it made the future brighter. I started writing again, little notes, letters I may never send, but they help. I cleared out old boxes in the attic, letting go of things that held me back, and held on to the memories that made me strong. I talked more openly with my family, shared bits of my story when I felt brave enough. And you know what? They listened. They loved me anyway. I'm not perfect. I still have moments of doubt, days when the old ache comes calling. But now I meet it with kindness instead of fear. I hold myself gently, like I would a child. And I remind myself that I am whole, not despite my past, but because of it. So here I am, now that I'm old, finally free in a way I never thought possible. I don't have all the answers. I still have regrets. But I carry my truth with grace, and that's enough. I chose to live, just as I am, without pretense, without shame, just forward. And if there's one thing I want you to know, it's that your story matters. No matter how hard, no matter how long it's been kept in the dark, there's power in truth, in acceptance, in love that doesn't ask for permission. That's the gift I give myself now. And maybe, if you're listening, it's a gift for you too. You know, over the years, I've thought a lot about that letter I wrote but never sent. It's funny how something so small can hold so much weight. That piece of paper, tucked away in the pages of my Bible, is like a snapshot of a moment frozen in time, a moment when I reached out, even if just with ink and paper, to a part of myself I wasn't ready to fully embrace. And now, looking back, I realized that letter was more than just words to Marian. It was a message to me, too. A message I needed to hear. Life has a way of teaching us things we don't expect, in ways we sometimes resist. Back then, I thought love had to look a certain way, the way folks around me said it should be. But love, I've come to understand, is 1,000 different things. It's messy, it's quiet, it's bold and brave, and sometimes it's hidden in places you wouldn't think to look. I learned that loving someone, or loving yourself, doesn't have to come with grand declarations or loud parades. Sometimes, it's just about holding onto a feeling, a truth that shapes you, even if you never say it out loud. That letter was my way of saying, I remember. I mattered. And that's a truth I think everyone needs to hold on to. That feeling of being seen, even if only by yourself, is powerful. It's the start of healing, of acceptance. And it's never too late for that. I've watched the world change a lot since I was that young girl in Kentucky, and I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful that today, young folks don't have to hide who they love the way I did, that they can be open, free, and proud. But I also know that the journey to that freedom isn't easy. It's full of hard choices and quiet battles. So, If there's one thing I want to share from all these years of keeping silent and holding secrets, it's this. Maybe it's time to stop waiting, to stop carrying the weight of what others might say or think. Maybe it's time to give yourself permission to be seen fully and without apology, because that's where real freedom lives. You young folks wouldn't understand, I used to say. But now I see that understanding isn't just about walking the same path. It's about listening with your heart and having the courage to be kind to yourself no matter what. It's about knowing that every story, even the ones we keep hidden, matters, and that you are never alone in your journey. I carry that letter with me, not as a burden, but as a reminder that the past doesn't have to define us, that the love we hold, even quietly and secretly, shapes who we become, and that sometimes the kindest thing we can do is to remember to hold our stories gently and to keep moving forward. So, maybe it's your turn now. Maybe it's time for you to stop waiting for permission, stop waiting for the perfect moment, and start living your truth. Because life is too short and love, in all its forms, is too precious to hide. You know, after all these years, I've come to believe that the kindest thing I ever did was simply to remember, to hold on to that first kiss, that secret love, that part of myself that no one else ever saw. It wasn't easy, mind you. Carrying a secret like that for so long, it's like carrying a piece of glass in your pocket. Sharp, hidden, and always there. But it was also a gift. A reminder of who I truly was beneath all the layers the world wrapped around me. Sometimes, I think about Marian. I wonder if she remembers me, if she ever thinks back to that night behind the barn in Kentucky, to the soft kiss that changed everything. And sometimes, just sometimes, I like to think he does, that moment lives on in a quiet corner of her heart too. Because that's what love does, you see. It lingers. It shapes us. It teaches us who we are even when the world tries to tell us otherwise. This story, my story, it's not just about a kiss or a secret. It's about the courage it takes to live your truth, to carry your past with grace, and to find peace in the present. It's about understanding that love comes in many forms, and none of them are wrong. It's about forgiveness, for ourselves, for others, for the life we didn't always get to choose. And I want to ask you, dear listener, as you sit there with your own memories, your own secrets, your own loves, do you think true love should come back? Do you believe it finds a way, even after years of silence? Or does it stay quiet, like a whisper only the heart can hear? I don't have all the answers. But I do know that love is never wasted, that it plants seeds in the most unlikely places and grows in ways we can't always see. That sometimes the kindest thing we can do for ourselves is to hold on to those seeds, nurture them with hope, and trust that they'll bloom when the time is right. So as you go about your days, carry this with you. Your story matters. Your love matters. And maybe, just maybe, the love you hold in your heart right now, whether spoken or silent, is the greatest gift you'll ever give yourself. Thank you for listening to my story, for sitting with me on this porch, sharing this moment across time and space. It means more than you know. And remember, sometimes I think that Marian still remembers too. What do you think? Should true love always find its way back? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Please leave a comment below.